Hey, I've got a really great idea. Let's tell a story about the literal representation of hell, but make all the men evil sexists and all the women strong repressed victims. Oh yeah, and let's have the Dark Lord rape his most loyal female minion. You know, the woman who rapes, tortures, and kills children in his name, because she's such a victim. Only a feminist would look at a character like Granny Goodness, a woman who literally tortures children all in the name of Darkseid, and think, wouldn't it be a great idea if she were really the victim? That's what feminist writer Cecil Castellucci did in this Female Furies miniseries that nobody asked for. But I guess in Castellucci's mind, silence is consent. Originally, this idea wasn't even intended for Apocalypse. Castellucci apparently scanned the DC encyclopedia looking for a character to force herself upon, but found out from Dan DiDio that the character she chose was already taken. DiDio offered up the Female Furies, and like any rising pimp, Castellucci added these pros to her stable. And of course, like any feminist writer, Castellucci read the Fourth World Omnibus and went, wow, these women have it so bad here. Men have all the power. They're all a bunch of abusive, sexist, would-be rapists. Even Darkseid. Well, duh. These guys are from Apocalypse, a literal hell world where everything is twisted, cruel, and evil. It's pretty much a given that these men would do horrible things like rape, and so would the women, but you're not going to see that in this book. But just to make it clear what type of world Apocalypse is, from the DC Wiki page, quote, the population is a downtrodden lot, including many kidnapped from other worlds before being broken. By broken, that means physically and mentally tortured until they do whatever they're told. Jack Kirby, the creator of the Fourth World, made no distinction between the types of suffering doled out, so it's safe to assume that whatever horrible shit happens to women also happens to men. But let's go on. Quote, the majority of the population is called lowlies, a bald and fearful race that has no sense of self-worth or value. The lowlies are subject to constant abuse that ends only with death. Yep, still no mention of this only being reserved for people with the vaginas. Moving on, quote, slightly above them are the parademons, who serve as the keepers of order on the planet. Higher above the parademons are the Female Furies, who are Darkseid's personal guard. Darkseid's personal guard is a bunch of badass women. I want you to keep that in mind. Moving on. Quote, they are blessed with unnatural strength and longevity and are allowed to develop as individuals. This exposure to new concepts often results in them developing comical or garish personalities that contrast strongly with the immense sadism that is required to reach their position. In other words, these are some twisted bitches. In other words, these aren't nice people. They're monsters. And they were made into monsters by, quote, Granny Goodness, who sports the appearance of a matronly old woman while being the most powerful of the guards. And what do we know about Granny Goodness? Well, she's a lowly, the bottom rung of Apocalypse's social class system. She was raised from childhood to be one of Darkseid's hounds. These are top-tier badasses. How dedicated was Granny to her training? Well, quote, one part of their training was to train their dog. Goodness named hers Mercy. Through combat and training, the two bonded. As a final step of her initiation into life as a hound, she was told to kill her beloved pet. Instead, she killed her trainer for ordering this. When Darkseid asked why, she answered that to have done otherwise would have robbed my lord of a most valuable asset, telling him that Mercy would obey her first, but him foremost. Testing this, Darkseid ordered Mercy to kill Goodness. Mercy attacked Goodness, forcing Goodness to kill her pet. Darkseid was impressed, telling Goodness that she had graduated with honors. You have trained Mercy so well in my name, that perhaps you will do as well training others whose blind obedience I will one day require. That is why Darkseid decided to have Granny Goodness run his training facility, because of her ability to create the most vicious, obedient soldiers for his command, not because, as Castellucci puts in the comic, Darkseid was giving her a job fitting for a woman. He was rewarding her, not shafting her, in both meanings of that word. Granny created elite soldiers for Darkseid by systematically torturing children until they died or obeyed. I will repeat that, just in case it isn't clear. Granny Goodness systematically tortures children until they die or obey. That is her job, which she enjoys doing and thinks is the right thing to do because it proves her loyalty to Darkseid. The result of this is the female Furies, a group of women so badass they become Darkseid's personal guard. Their job isn't just to defend Darkseid. They're also a strike force, meaning these are the folks sent out to destroy and conquer worlds. They torture people. They kill people. In all probability, they rape people. Such is their cruelty. So now that you know the context of who these characters are, let's get to Castellucci's story. Like I said before, her original idea had nothing to do with the female Furies. It actually had nothing to do with any DC character. She had this idea of deconstructing the patriarchy in the era of the Me Too movement and basically looked for a DC character she could fuck up with her feminist bullshit. The one she wanted to use was taken, so the deal offered up the female Furies. And therein lies the problem. As I just showed you, the female Furies are not good people. Granny Goodness is not a good person. These are evil people who do evil things because they're evil. So to take this group of people and try to play the women have it worse game is ridiculous. Here's what Castellucci says in an interview with a Hollywood Reporter. Kirby knew that women were capable and strong and equal, but he also knew that wasn't the case in his present day. So that's stitched in there. The way men comment on Barter's body. The way that men on Apocalypse talk about the Furies. The way Guillotina, who's not in my book, handles a handsy guard. The way that Granny treats her own girls. It felt like a real ripe time to take a look at these kinds of issues within the context of a story that was already inherently commenting on it and addressing it. Right. Only a feminist would look at evil women who do evil things and go, they're such victims. If you think this is just me making it up, here you go. Quote, women have been enduring these kinds of stories of not being able to advance in fields for years, and even with progress being made, we still face challenges. Look at all the headlines these days. It's amazing that we're saying enough. With the fourth world, I thought it would be interesting to see an awakening on the level of a Me Too movement, but on a planet where everyone is really the bad guy, even the gals, because everything is heightened. Just wow. Only a feminist would think this way. Only a feminist would look at Stalinist Russia and go, how come the women aren't allowed to arrest people and throw them into gulags? Sexist. Only a feminist would look at 1940s Germany and go, how come the women aren't allowed to shove people into ovens? Sexist. This is what she sounds like. Like someone who genuinely thinks it's okay for women to be evil, but it's not okay for evil men to be evil towards women. This is her argument. Literally, look at how evil these men are towards women. Yeah, they're fucking evil. What part of evil don't you understand besides it also being done by people with vaginas? Because as you will see in the story, she never shows the female Furies being evil. They're not even mean. All of them, including Granny Goodness, are shown as put upon by lesser men, including Darkseid, and never getting credit for all their hard work. They're never shown as doing anything wrong, let alone evil, whereas the men are always shown as evil. Of course, since everyone on Apocalypse outside of Miracle Man, when he's there, is evil, this is redundant. Of course these people would be backstabby. Of course they would be jerks. Of course they would be rapists. They're evil. That's literally what they do. It's like being shocked that when you go to hell, bad shit happens to you. You're gonna make me sit in the lake of feces? Yes. I'm gonna hang from a tree because I killed myself? Yes. I'm gonna go to hell but not go inside but just sit outside because even though I lived a moral life, I didn't believe in Jesus because it didn't exist yet, so I don't get to go to heaven? Yes. That's what the fuck happens. And just in case you think I'm being unfair, this is Castellucci. Quote, the paradox and the unfairness of the Furies and Granny being pushed to the side just burst through, and it was as though Barter herself shook me and said, ah, tell it from our side. Yes, of course. Tell how the women who bought, sold, and owned slaves were put upon by the evil Southern gentleman society. We shall not let the women folks speak our own property. How put upon they shall be. Begone, woman, out of my sight. And she's like, fine. I should never have married you, Colonel Angus. I shall get over this slight by beating my young Negro Rufus, and then making him touch my dirty pillows. I do love the touch of his rough hands over my supple body. Yes, yes, let's hear the side of the evil women who conveniently never do anything evil in a story. I know I usually mention the art, but fuck it this time. It's hit or miss. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's, oh my god, did you do that on purpose bad. I'll give the colors credit. When it jumps back and forth through times, the older times are shown as flat 4 colors and the current stuff is shown in the modern super rendering. Now, let's get on to this stupid story nobody actually wanted. So the premise of this miniseries is that Granny Goodness gets no respect. It starts off with Darkseid sending Goodness to murder his mother Hegra, the Queen of Apocalypse. Now, in the original telling, it's Desaad who kills Hegra, but in Castellucci's feminist revisioning, we get this weird chick fight, and it's made worse because they're both ugly. If you're gonna have women fight, they at least need to be pretty. Otherwise, what's the point? What? If she can be sexist, I can be sexist too? Me too, damn it. By the way, this fight makes no sense. The background keeps changing to suit whatever the writer or artist needs Goodness to do in the fight in order to win, so you have no idea where these two are in the room. Tables and columns just appear out of nowhere. And then there's a clunky feminist dialogue. Hegra says, "Don't think by killing me you'll gain Darkseid's heart. He's a man." I mean, I don't have a problem with this because these are evil people, so I don't expect Hegra to love Darkseid, but the line is so stupid. Followed by this shit Goodness says when she's hit with a fucking table. How does she talk when she's getting hit with a table? She says, "A disgusting thought. I don't want his heart, I want his respect." And she gets it by pulling his mother's head out of her voluminous vagina. Bad art decision. Bad decision. So Desaad shows up and warns Goodness that Darkseid is on his way and wants Hegra dead before he gets there. Goodness is trying to choke Hegra to death, but it's taking too long, so Desaad tosses her some poison, and she uses it to kill the queen. Then Darkseid comes in and asks if his mother is dead, and Desaad promptly says, "Yes, I killed her." And Darkseid believes this, even though Goodness is still humping his mother's body with a fucking vial in her hand. She's there. She's right fucking there. On top of the woman. This fool is halfway across the room. Why do you believe him? Why is Goodness on top of this woman if Desaad killed her? What is she doing? Is she trying to bring her back to life? Obviously Goodness killed Hegra, but in feminist wonderland, women get no respect. So of course Darkseid gives Desaad the credit. Oddly enough, this strong-willed woman never says a word during this whole thing. You'd think she'd be like, "You see the smoking vial in my hand? Desaad gave me the poison, but I poured it down her throat." No, she just stands there. This is a perfect representation of feminism, claiming women are being held back by women choosing not to speak. So then it flashes to the present where Granny comes in late for a meeting. She says, "I was misinformed of the meeting time. I'm here now with a surefire plan." Her plan? Send the female Furies in as a strike force to deal with the Forever People. This makes rational sense given that the Forever People are themselves a small strike force. It's easier to fight them using their own tactics against them than sending in scores of soldiers who can be seen coming light years away. Or, as all the men say, "Stick to running tricks, bitch." They all turn it down, and then Desaad throws the fact that he took credit for her kill in her face in front of everyone, including Darkseid. So they all know that she killed Hegra, but nobody says anything. Granny asks Darkseid for a chance to show what the female Furies can do, and he agrees to it, and Desaad is like, "Always getting special treatment, Granny, and yet you constantly complain." And he says this while Darkseid is like 10 feet away. How is he still alive? He's literally insulting Darkseid to the man's back and lives. In any other version of this story, Desaad would have had the Omega Beam cutting through him by the time he got halfway through the word special. But in the feminist revisioning of Apocalypse, men throw shade at their murderous boss's bottom bitch in his presence, undermining his power, and live to tell the tale. So then we go back to the past where we see all of Darkseid's right-hand men. Just a quick question. How many right hands does he have? I see one, and that's usually the number of metaphorical right hands a person has too. You have one right-hand man, not 5. Castellucci is like, "I'm a feminist." Yeah, but you can still count. You only have one right hand, so you only have one right-hand man. It's usually the closest person you trust. They can't all be his most trustworthy soldier. Jesus. Speaking of unexpected nocturnal visits from a god, Darkseid shows up to Goodness's room and demands the Nucky. He's like, "Battle makes me hunger for what food cannot fill. Come here, Goodness." Because this is what would-be rapists sound like to feminists. And Goodness, the supposed badass, just doesn't know what he's talking about. How is that possible? You live in literal hell. This is hardly the first time someone would have tried to fuck you, or you saw someone get fucked, or you tried to fuck someone. You're all evil, so this is happening all the fucking time. But she's like, "What? I don't understand." And Darkseid just moves in. You will have power in my new reign, but you must give yourself to me completely. So it's a transaction. Oh, I can hear you going, he's raping her. No, let's read it again. He says, you will have power in my new reign, but you must give yourself to me completely. He's not making her do anything. He's telling her to make a choice. I know what the pictures look like. It's drawn to make it look like he's forcing her under the threat of violence, but that's not what he says, and here's the proof. When Goodness says, no, Darkseid doesn't force his way in. Instead, he says, do as I say and rise higher than anyone else. Refuse and find yourself back with the lowest of the low. And she says, I will obey. Guess what? That's not rape. I can prove it. Let's change what happens and say that Darkseid tells Goodness to kill her dog Mercy. She says no, and he says do it and get power, or refuse and be a loser forever. If she kills the dog, did he force her to do it? No, she made a choice, and that's exactly what happened here. If Darkseid wanted to force himself onto her, he'd have just done it, the same way he just kills people who displease him. No warning, no talk, instant death. It would have been instant Darkseid boner. But he didn't do that. He wants her to be obedient, to do as she is told, to be 100% loyal no matter what. So he tells her to do it and waits for her to comply, and then tells her what will happen if she doesn't, which interestingly enough doesn't include him fucking her without her permission. So even in this feminist revisioning of Apocalypse, Darkseid still isn't a rapist, even though by feminist logic he is a rapist because man, penis, patriarchy, and male privilege. I love how Castellucci fucks this up. You have one job. Make Darkseid force himself on Goodness, and instead you have him make her an offer she can totally refuse. He offers her power in exchange for the booty, or he'll toss her out without tapping that ass. Who would have thought a feminist would be this bad at lying about rape when they lie about it so often? But let's say Darkseid is a rapist. And he's a personification of evil. It'd be shocking if he weren't a rapist. You'd imagine that he'd just fuck whoever or whatever caught his fancy. Are you really trying to get people to be shocked that a villain does villainous things? Are you that fucking stupid that you literally think it's shocking that the physical embodiment of evil would commit an evil act? Only a feminist would think you'd be amazed by this. Oh look, the Japanese invaded China and they're torturing and killing people and using them in chemical weapons experiments, just destroying their lives, and oh my fucking god, they raped women. Thousands of them. Unbelievable. Only a feminist will look at all the horrible things Darkseid does and thinks that anyone with a functional brain would be more horrified by him not actually raping Granny Goodness. On a scale of all the fucked up things Darkseid does, rape isn't even in the top 100. He's way worse than that. For example, he fucks him and leaves him and doesn't even feed him. She's like, Darkseid, did you think he was gonna stay? Why? He's got his world's 500th anniversary to plan, his wedding to arrange, his wife to murder, and new Genesis to frame for it. He's swamped. So Goodness shows up to the next morning's meeting late, and she's like, I wasn't informed we were meeting this early, though I thought I had your ear last night. Yeah, that's exactly what a traumatized victim would say. I mean, this comes across like she thinks he's supposed to tell her stuff because they're in a consensual relationship, not like he's abusing her, which is what the writer wants us to think. And then, as if it weren't stupid enough, Darkseid randomly decides to put Goodness in charge of the orphanage. All the men laugh, and Goodness, who the night before was so helpless to Darkseid's sexual advances, shouts, I'm not going to be a glorified nanny. I'm your equal. I'm more valuable an asset to you than them. I won't stand for it. I helped make you. Right, so let me get this straight. The same bitch who cowered the night before now has the gumption to berate Darkseid. Fucking Darkseid, to his face, in front of his minions, calling herself his equal and saying she made him. How the fuck is this bitch a victim, and how is she still alive? Dan Turpin threw shade at Darkseid, and Darkseid killed him on a fucking whim just to spite Superman. Goodness straight up calls him out and basically says she's his better, and Darkseid lets this go. Whatever Castellucci was trying to do, she just ruined it. This is not a weak woman. Goodness doesn't appear to be the slightest bit afraid of Darkseid, so why would she cower at his sexual advances? Why wouldn't she tell him to go use Desaad's mouth since he's so eager to please? Only a feminist would try to have it both ways, showing a woman to be weak and helpless while strong and assertive. And of course, once Goodness is put in charge of the orphanage, she's never shown to be cruel or vicious or merciless or evil in any way. When she shows off her best warrior, Aurele, it's all presented as Goodness just pushing them to be better than the men. They train harder and longer, that's all. All the torture Granny Goodness is known for, completely scrapped. So what you have at this point is a villain who's never shown as villainous. Goodness is the heroine of the story, and is presented that way, as are the female Furies. They're never shown as doing anything wrong or evil. They're always strong and powerful until they're the victims of the evil patriarchy. And it's just disgusting because what Castellucci does is try to hide the fact that Granny Goodness is a child abuser, child torturer, and child killer who enjoys what she does. She likes breaking kids. She relishes their pain and suffering. She thinks it's a tool to use to make them obedient servants of Darkseid. Everything she does is cruel. There's not a single thing she does that isn't a potential source of manipulation and cruelty. Even getting these kids to bond with each other is something she'll use against them later on. But all this is gone. There's zero mention of it, which is typical of feminists. They very rarely admit that women do bad things, and when they do admit it, it's always men's fault. Women are never responsible for their cruelty, and when that idiotic argument won't fly because of all the evidence proving it's bullshit, feminists do what Castellucci did and argue that women have it worse. Oh, just forget that Granny Goodness tortures and kills kids. She was raped, not really. That's much worse. You know, like how blackface is worse than killing a baby that survived an abortion. Not even fucking close, and I don't have a problem saying that. Child abuse is worse than any violence committed against women. Hands down, unequivocally worse. And the only people who disagree are feminists. These are the only human beings on the face of the planet who think you should be more outraged that a bunch of villainous men are talking about the female Furies' bodies than the fact that the woman who trained them abuses, tortures, and kills children. And to prove how serious Castellucci wants you to take this unfair treatment of the female Furies, she has the evil men do the ultimate evil thing to these strong, powerful women. Make them do women's work in a contest. I'm not making this up. This is real. Look at the screen. This shit is real. Your eyes are not lying. Yes, Darkseid is making the female Furies have a bake-off, evening gown, and smile contest, which they all fail, and Goodness, who's so terrified of Darkseid's sexual advances, destroys a table in a fit of rage, because she's such a helpless victim. So then Willick shows up and wants to get his grubby hands all over Aurelia's body. And because he outranks Goodness, she has no choice but to give in. So the special training begins. Okay, if this is really as bad as it's supposed to get. Okay, I'm pretty sure Granny Goodness has put Aurelia through far worse than this before she lost her baby teeth. But come on, let's pretend that Willick McGrabbyhands is the worst thing to ever happen to Aurelia. We're supposed to be outraged that evil people are doing evil things. So Barda shows up, and she and Aurelia go to capture some escaped child who's run away from the orphanage. Now, we're never told why she ran away. From what we've seen in the book, she has no reason to run. Granny Goodness is just a tough drill instructor. It's not like she does anything cruel or wrong, and if she does, we never see it. But Aurelia is distracted by the concept of peace and another way being preached by Himan, and while Barda, Big Barda, who's super strong, struggles to get controlled over a little girl, Rublon, Steppenwolf's bastard, shows up to take the girl. After trash-talking the Furies for having vaginas, takes the girl and tells her to give him a kiss and the torture will be less severe. And Aurelia just ain't having it. She lets the girl go and cuts Rublon's throat. And this woman, who's been trained from childhood to maim, torture, and slaughter people, justifies her actions by saying, it doesn't matter who he was. He was going to harm the girl. You literally killed a guy for doing what you're trained to do, and you technically just did. Only a feminist would think it's horrible when men commit violence, but perfectly fine when women do it. And this is how the issue ends, with Barda and Aurelia burying Rublon's body on a comet. The future of the fourth world is female, and fucking retarded. This is by far the worst comic in a while from DC Comics. Not only is this book trying its damnedest to out stupid man-eaters with this ridiculous story and feminist propaganda, but it's also trying to paint over the fact that Granny Goodness is a child abuser, child torturer, and child murderer. You're supposed to sympathize with her because one time Darkseid told her to fuck him or go, so that makes those hundreds of years she spent brutalizing children perfectly okay, or at least not worth mentioning. You're supposed to pretend that it's oh so terrible that a planet full of evil people do evil things to each other, except women. The women never do evil things. Ever. In this book, and I would imagine the remaining 5 issues, you don't see a single woman commit a single crime. Not one act. Even goodness-killing Hegra is never presented as evil, cruel, morally questionable, or just not a good idea. Everything they do is perfectly righteous. Only the men are shown as evil, comically evil, which would normally be a bad thing, except they're supposed to be evil. Of course, this shitty book is being applauded in the usual circles as so relevant and fresh and brave in this Me Too era. You know what would have been fresh and brave? Have this miniseries tie in with the Miracle Man series by showing everything Granny Goodness did to him to try to break him. If you were willing to show that Granny Goodness repeatedly raped Scott free from the time he was a child, that would have been brave, especially for feminists, since getting them to admit women rape boys is like trying to pry them away from their cats. But you didn't do that. Instead, you went with the laziest, most half-assed Lifetime special retelling of a story imaginable. You're literally trying to paint a child killer as sympathetic because of feminism, and all I can say is, fuck you. I don't give a good goddamn what Darkseid does to Granny Goodness. She tortures and kills kids. Unless Darkseid did something to her when she was a kid, I don't fucking care. She's not a victim. Even in your bullshit story, she's not a victim. She chooses to have sex with Darkseid in order to get and maintain power, and then Darkseid, for some inexplicable reason, punks her at every turn. I know the female Furies didn't get much to do in the original Fourth World series, but I have to wonder how much of that was Kirby deciding not to use them, or DC Comics not letting him show women as violent and cruel. Either way, this revisioning just pisses all over Kirby's Fourth World legacy. The psychological points he wanted to make are thrown out for this moronic, anti-male feminist bullshit better left for the young adult novels Castellucci writes that no one reads. Go write your own comic book. Don't take someone else's ideas that you clearly don't respect on any level and fuck them up with this masturbatory fantasy about how it's so much worse for women in the literal representation of hell. Hell sucks for everyone, not just people with vaginas. Now, I don't personally believe in hell, but if there is one, there's a special place for people who think playing grabby hands is worse than torturing and killing kids. Seems like maybe someone should check this woman's computer. I'm not saying the feds need to go full Roger Stone on her, but whenever you see someone trying this hard to make a child killer look like a saint, there's some other shit at play. You might want to breeze through that hard drive a couple of times. Maybe check the cache. See who she used to follow on Tumblr before they banned the porn. Personal opinion, might want to check that out. But what do I know? I'm just some guy. I know your ass doesn't know what rape looks like. I know that much. You might want to wear a body cam if you go out on a date with this woman. You might need to record that shit and catch her doing whatever it is that inspires her to sympathize with child killers.